So our get-to-know guest is Marcie Finney. She's the executive director of the Cleveland Cord Blood Center, located in Warrensville Heights. Their mission is advancing umbilical cord blood cell therapy treatments, saving lives, enhancing health, and expanding knowledge one birth at a time. But before we get into the details of the organization and the cord blood, and to find out more about cord blood, let's get to know Marcie, and then we'll dive into what I think is a really exciting science. So Marcie, if you would tell your story, that'd be great.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I grew up in Cleveland, West Side in Lorain County. I was really the first person in my family to go to college directly out of high school. My dad did go, but after he got out of the Navy after his time in service. So I went to college. I thought I was going to be a physical therapist. That's what I went to school for. I ended up at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania. And, it was a great experience. And I got started in that and started to take some science classes. And I can remember taking my first chemistry course and my professor coming up to me and holding my exam up and saying, chemist, did you study a lot for this exam? And I said, oh, yeah, I studied. And he said, this doesn't come that easy to people. Maybe science is something that you should think about. He said, this is a really great score. And as I got further along in it, I realized I really did like science. And I decided to become a chemistry and physics major and graduated from Slippery Rock with that. And my first jobs were really technical, analytical chemistry jobs, much different than what I do today. I worked for Moen Faucets, the faucet manufacturer. I looked at trace metals out of faucets that leak into the water that we drink. And then I got a job at Case Western Reserve as a research technician, where I did, again, really specialized analytical work looking at the components of the blood and urine and tissue from patients that had metabolic disorders. We were looking at profiles from them, really technical and analytical. And then I had a really great friend who was a pharmaceutical rep for oncology and cancer drugs. And she came to me and said, Marcie, this woman moved to Cleveland from Duke. Her name is Mary Laughlin. She's a transplant physician. She's starting this whole cord blood thing. I think the two of you would just really be a great collaboration. And I said, Maria, I'm finishing my graduate degree. I'm about to get married. I don't want a new job. I like the lab I'm at. I've been here for a long time. And she said, no. So she set up a meeting for the two of us to meet. And I met Dr. Mary Laughlin. And we did hit it off immediately. She said, I'm starting up my lab. I want you to be my lab manager. And I said, I'm sorry, Dr. Laughlin, this is lovely, but I can't. I need to finish my degree. I'm getting married. Why don't you call me in a year? And I thought, I'll never hear from this woman again. But lo and behold, she did call me back in a year. And that was 2000. And I had gotten married and I finished my degree. And I thought, this woman is dynamic. She's a visionary. And I thought, I said to her, I'm a chemistry major. I do really analytical chemistry. I don't know anything about biology. And she said, I think the synergy is that she had a lot of biologists in her lab, and they don't do quite as rigorous of experimental design as someone with a chemistry background is. I'm quantitative. I want to see numbers. And she said, I think that adding you to the team will give some structure to those people to design better experiments. And, it really worked. I got a chance to learn about, I'd never dealt with anything alive in my scientific career. I learned about growing cells. I learned about analyzing them, taking pictures of them. And, we took a project from mice to getting it to test it in humans in that lab. And then, so I worked in her research lab as a research technician for a couple of years. And then I can remember a day I was working on a mouse experiment. We were testing stem cells in a mouse. And Dr. Laughlin came up to me and said, we're going to have a cord blood bank in Ohio. And I said, no, we're not. We're writing a grant. We're finishing these animal experiments. We're supposed to start a whole new study next week. We can't do that. She said, yes, we can. We can do this. So she went out and got funding from a family foundation, the Katz Foundation, to start a public umbilical cord blood bank in Ohio. At the time, there were banks in New York City. There was a cord blood bank at Duke, and there was a bank in St. Louis. And there was really nothing in the Midwest that collected umbilical cord blood. And so I took the jump with her. The Cord Blood Center was started in 2008, and I moved from Case Western to the Cord Blood Center and started the collection programs in the hospitals, and began to collect cord blood and bring it to this bank in Warrensville Heights. And I did that for several years. We opened collection sites, 2 in Cleveland, 2 in Atlanta, Georgia, and now we have 2 in San Francisco, California. And then around 6 years ago, our founding cord blood bank director, who was a scientist, retired. And Dr. Laughlin called me and with short notice said, I'd like you to be the executive director. And I said, okay, but I really don't know anything about business. We're back to the same place we were when I started with her. And she said, well, we can figure that out. And I was given the opportunity through the foundation to get my executive MBA at Case Western Reserve University. And I do remember that we had grown from an organization of 3 or 4 or 5 people to now we were in 20 employees. And I remember the first day I was executive director, we gathered everyone around to talk about it. And I said, if I asked our staff at that moment that we had the best cord blood units for patients, everyone would have raised their hands. But if I asked people at that time if the Cleveland Cord Blood Center was a great place to work, I don't think there would have been a lot of hands. We were really focused on the science, really focused on the patients, but we really hadn't done anything to develop our employees. Everyone was so dedicated, heads down, just trying to get the work done. So that's really been a big part of my mission myself at the Cleveland Cord Blood Center, to make this a good place to work. We not only have the impact on the patients we serve with these cord bloods, we can impact the 35 people that work here and make their lives better.
Yeah, that's a great story. That really is a great story. And I think that not only your path, but how it ended, and taking a good business or a good business model, and then being able to, I think that the next challenging part for anyone, any place, is to make it a good place to work. And I know, Karen, it's not your turn, but I know you could talk about that forever, right? Trying to make it a good environment.
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
You know what, Marcie? It is really nice to hear that you're focusing on a company culture, because I truly believe if your employees do not come into work with a smile on their face and they're happy to go to work, you're going to have a very hard time being productive and really reaching the goals that you want to do. And I think everybody should have the goal of having an awesome culture within their company. Hey, over since I've been working here for 12 years, there's been so many changes. There's been even what we've gone through, and I know everybody's tired of hearing it, of COVID, but now we're having unemployment issues, trying to find it. It's so difficult to find people that want to work, that even show up for an interview. And, sometimes I'm like, what else can I do? And I'm at a loss right now. So it's really nice to hear that you're focusing on your employees and making them happy and having them enjoy coming to work. I so heartedly believe in that. I do.
That's great. That's great. So, tell me about the Weatherhead at Case. What was how much did that contribute to that, the environment and the whole business part of it?
I think it was a huge part. So, I had been educated mostly in science, right? Mm-hmm. So the Weatherhead School, I found learning about business was like learning another language, right? It's a vocabulary that people know. And as I was running board meetings and being involved in financial decisions for our organization, the vocabulary was really challenging. I have a wonderful accountant that's been with us for a long time who really helped me to understand how to read financial statements. But the really unique part I found, there were two really unique things about the Weatherhead program. One was this executive MBA program were all individuals that had another profession and were now getting into management or the business side of their organization. I believe half of our class were physicians.
Wow.
So think about the same principle as me, right? They've been trained in medicine, caring for patients. And then when they get those administrative roles, they're looking at financial statements and projections and strategic plans and human resources and legal. So all of those things are necessary when you get to that level. So I found that part was really welcoming because we were all kind of in the same boat trying to learn this on the fly. And the other piece of the Weatherhead program that was really beneficial to me was there were significant amount of time placed on professional development. So we started with ourselves in the first semester, then we worked on teams, then we worked on organizations, and then the final semester was a global view of how your organization could impact the environment and the world in general, which was a steep learning curve to go from yourself all the way up to the globe in 2 years. But they really did an amazing job. And to think about the decisions you make, even in a small organization, have a huge impact outside of it. We had one of our first assignments was to write our own mission, vision, and value statement for yourself, which was really difficult.
Are there milestones that you want to talk about? You know, there's some moments that you really felt you achieved some sort of success or that you really remember?
Sure. I think one of them was I gone to Slippery Rock University, which was not the most prestigious university. I chose it because I wanted to be a physical therapist. And when I was a sophomore, I wanted to transfer to Case Western. And I got in, and I remember my dad taking me there and him saying, you know, we went through the whole tour about me transferring to Case Western. And we were walking down the street and he said, I have to tell you that I lost my job today.
Mm.
So this is probably not going to be able to happen. I had a scholarship at Slippery Rock. And he said, I just don't think we're going to be able to do this. And I said, okay, Dad, that's all right. I finished my degree at Slippery Rock, and then I got a job at Case because I was bound and determined that I was going to have a degree from Case Western at that point. So
great.
and then I ended up with two, right? Because I ended up working there and I got my classes for free all the way through to get my master's. And I do joke that in the meantime, I met my husband and got married, that I took my classes and I took my cumulative exams to do my PhD, but I got married and then I had kids. So I say I got my MOM instead of my PhD. But then I ended up going back one more time to Case to get my executive MBA. So I think it worked out for the best.
Great. Anything, this doesn't have to be in the video, anything that any do-overs, anything that you said, oh, I failed miserably?
I wouldn't say any of that. I do say if I had one regret, I was a pretty serious athlete in high school. I had 8 varsity letters in 3 different sports. And I did have a chance to play college basketball, but at a school that wasn't probably the right fit for me. But I do wonder some days if I had it to do over again, I probably would have played basketball because I love the sport. I coached high school basketball, which is a thing people probably don't realize about me at work. So I was really embedded in the sport. And I think if I had it to do over again, I might have played basketball because I probably would have been okay anyway.
Good. In a nutshell, tell us about the work. Tell us about the work of the organization, Cleveland Cord Blood Center, because it is complicated. I don't know if everyone understands what you do. So in a nutshell, can you tell us?
Sure. So the Cleveland Cord Blood Center is a nonprofit public umbilical cord blood bank. And It's an opportunity for families that are having a child to donate their umbilical cord blood to us. Umbilical cord blood is normally thrown away as medical waste. And if the families agree, we take it to our facility here in Warrensville Heights and we test it and we freeze it. And we can use that cord blood to treat patients with blood disorders. Most of the time it's leukemia and lymphoma. So one of our favorite cord blood transplant survivors calls it the ultimate recycling program, trash to treasure, because something that's normally thrown away saved her life.
There's a female who's pregnant that goes into the hospital. How does that work? Because that might be the first time they even hear about this, right?
I think the best thing to understand about us is we have directed donation sites because it's very complicated and it's a long education process. So what we've done in our 6 collection sites is have an education program where families are talked to about what they're going to do with their umbilical cord blood while they're pregnant, while the mom is pregnant. So they don't have to make that decision on the fly. So that's part of it. And we educate them that it's much like when you donate blood to the American Red Cross. When you donate blood, you anticipate that that blood won't be saved for you. It'll be used immediately for someone who needs it right now. And then if you need blood, that there'll be someone behind you that will donate for you. That's exactly the way the public banking system works. Families donate their cord blood to us in anticipation that it'll be used for someone else.
Mm-hmm. And so the cord blood is donated, and the cord blood is then used for stem cells. Is that right? Is that,
yes?
Because that's really what it's all about, isn't it? Stem cells?
Yes. So if you hear the term that someone needs a stem cell transplant, that can come from several different places. It can come from your own stem cells. Mm-hmm. It can come from a matched sibling. It can come from a matched unrelated donor, or it can come from a cord blood. And those stem cells that are transplanted, that person has a cancer in their liquid blood system. So what they do with these stem cells is it goes into your bone marrow and it starts to regrow your whole immune system. One of the things that makes that make sense to me is when someone gets a stem cell transplant, they acquire the cells from that donor, whether it's a sibling or whether it's a cord blood, and they regrow an immune system that matches that donation. The thing that makes it concrete to me is those patients, once they're through all that treatment, they have to get their vaccines over again, just like when they were babies, that whole series. So they're starting with a completely clean slate, just like they were reborn.
Okay, so stem cells, if I have this right, and I think I do because I mess with this just a little bit. They're regenerative. It's a regenerative medicine, correct? And stem cells have no specific function, correct? Like nerve cells, skin cells, blood cells, but they have the potential to replace other bad cells in your body. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very close.
Okay.
There are some specifics about the stem cells in umbilical cord blood. They cannot grow into any cell. They are really specific for blood.
Okay. And so I really am really interested in, in this whole medicine and in the science. And is this something that you think in the future is going to play a big role in?
Absolutely.
Medicine?
So we know that stem cells, unfortunately for all of us, we're just getting older every day, right? They're at their most potent and most plentiful on the day you're born, right? And it just goes downhill from there. So I think that there is anything that we can do to make ourselves healthier will also increase those stem cells and their vitality over your life. The beautiful thing about umbilical cord blood is, right, it's a snapshot of these babies right when they're born. So in my opinion, you won't have stem cells that are more plentiful or more powerful than the ones that we capture in cord blood on the day these babies are born. So umbilical cord blood stem cells are unfortunately named adult stem cells because they've already passed that point where they can become anything. They're called hematopoietic stem cells technically, which means hematopoietic means of the blood. So they can only make blood cells. Embryonic stem cells, where it's actually a fetus that never developed, have more potential, obviously, to turn into many different kinds of cells. But the cells that we use in umbilical cord blood are not destroying any life. They're left over after the baby's born and normally are just discarded as medical waste.
Okay. How does a person go about requesting, right? I mean, who requesting the cord blood treatment? Do I have some disease or something and I say, well, how about, doctor, can you give me cord blood treatment? How does that work?
That's an excellent question. So the government in 2000, in the 90s decided to establish a national cord blood inventory. And that is maintained by a donor registry called the National Merit Donor Program. And they manage both the umbilical cord blood registry and the adult donors. So if you're not one, you can register to become an adult donor where they could harvest your stem cells to treat patients. And all of those donors, the cord blood donors and adult donors, are on one registry. So if a transplant physician needs a stem cell transplant for one of their patients, they go on the computer on their national registry, type in the information about their patient, and all of the adult donors and all of the cord bloods that are suitable for that patient will come up on a list. And then that physician will choose the stem cell source that's right for their patient.
Well, I would just say, let's just say I come up with one of these diseases that possibly this science could work on. Do I request that, or does this doctor just know that, or can I say this is what I want? I don't want chemotherapy. I want a stem cell.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I believe that most of the therapies come through physicians.
Okay.
So I think we're in a new era of medicine, in my opinion, where I think you cannot be more of an advocate for yourself. So I think that medicine is changing. I think the answer 20 years ago would have been, oh no, only the doctor gets to decide what happens to their patients, right?
Yeah.
I think today we are all way more educated about medicine, and probably to a blessing and a curse, there is information at our fingertips. I think,
right.
My telephone, I can look up almost anything that would have been a real challenge 15
right.
years ago. So I think that there is room for patient advocacy, I think, regardless of what you're being treated for in medicine. And I think that physicians today are really cognizant of that, and they listen to patients and want to make sure that they're getting the treatment that they want to.
Is it expensive? Is it covered by insurance? If I were to say, listen, this is what I want.
It is covered by insurance. So we get funding from a couple of different sources. We have a couple of philanthropic families that support our mission that give us grant money. We also get some funding from the government for collecting cord blood units. And then when a cord blood unit is used for transplant, it is a billable charge through insurance, and we get that reimbursement through the National Merit Donor Program.
Great. How about patient success stories? Now that we've talked about what it can do, can you tell us about any success stories that you?
I can. I have a couple. So in our 13 years, we've treated over 700 patients in over 20 countries, which was a surprise to us. We didn't really, when we started this, think about the global impact that it might have. I have a few favorites. One is Diana Turpak. She was a school nurse, about in her mid-50s, I think, and just started not feeling well. She is a Caucasian, went to the doctor and said they tested her blood, and her blood counts were completely erratic and not the way they were supposed to be. And the physicians, our medical director, Mary Laughlin, was her treating physician, and they could not find a match for her on the adult donor registry. So they looked for a cord blood, and she found one and was treated. And she routinely talks about herself as being the ultimate recycling program, because she finds it just amazing that something that's normally thrown away can have such a big impact on herself and her family. Another patient that I know, his name is Gail, and he was also saved by an umbilical cord blood. He didn't have any other donors, was treated with the cord blood, was very, very ill, and now leads a wonderful lifestyle. He owns a Chick-fil-A. And what was really interesting about his story was his daughter recently was able to donate cord blood to our program with one of his grandchildren. So that was a wonderful way to come completely full circle in his story.
Wow, that's great. That's great. How's the pandemic affected the work of the Cleveland Cord Blood Center? In all those areas, whether it's distancing or did you work remotely, labor, we have a very skilled labor force, supplies. How has that affected what you do?
So it was a real challenge for us. We are a small organization. We have 35 employees, around 20 that work in Warrensville Heights at our center here. And then we have nurses across the country that do the collection piece. The challenge for us here in Cleveland was that in order to send a cord blood unit to a patient, we need to have 5 different people here on site. We need to have 2 technicians. We need to have a quality control person. We need to have a collections person, and we need to have a leadership person, all to check all of the paperwork and make sure all of the documents are right before we send this unit out to the patient. So there are about 20 of us that work here. So when the pandemic hit, we decided to work in teams, because if all 20 of us were here every day so we could send units out and we had to quarantine, then we would not be able to serve our patients. So what we did was split into a minimal staffing model where there were 5 people each day that could serve all of those roles. So we could send units out to patients if need be, but we didn't have a lot of crossing of the teams. So for instance, if the Monday team had to quarantine, then the Tuesday team would just work on site Monday and Tuesday so that we could always have staff available to serve our patients. It was a big challenge for us because we technically didn't qualify as essential staff because we don't have patient interaction directly. Yeah. So it was very challenging. And most of us had barely, if at all, worked at home. So there were a lot of technical challenges, remote access and computers and monitors and printers, and just knowing where everybody was and logging that in case we had to do contact tracing was challenging for us. However, I'll say that during the pandemic, there was not one shipment that didn't go out because we didn't have staffing.
That's great. That's excellent. And where are you today with all of that? Is everybody back in, or are you?
I think there are some positives to working at home. So we gave our staff the opportunity to work up to half-time at home and half-time on site. And that seems to be working for us. Some people chose not to work at home at all. Some people chose to work half-time. So I have to be honest, this is the second month of us coming back. So we're still settling in a bit, and I really couldn't tell you how it's going to play out in the long term.
Yeah, that's good. And your skilled workforce, you're working with scientists, right? What's it like working with scientists?
The benefit of scientists are, Dr. Laughlin, who's our founder and medical director, is an MD, but has done a lot of research over her lifetime. So I would say she does both of those, but she's a huge visionary. She has these amazing grand plans. And then myself and our team of scientists are charged with actually developing the strategy and tactics to put them into play. So I think if you want to plan something, you want to call on the scientists because they want to, why are we doing this project? What's the beginning? What's the data in the middle? And what are the steps to get it done? And slow and steady wins the race is the way I would describe working with scientists. They're very deliberate. They want to see intermittent results and data, and then they're going to make their next decision on how to adjust to that.
That's great. That's excellent. Marcie, this will be the last question, and if there's any questions, but Marcie, what do you still hope to accomplish at the Cleveland Cord Blood Center?
So what has happened over our existence is that the use of cord blood hasn't really grown in the way that we had hoped it would. So we are a little bit challenged with finding alternative uses for cord blood. that we didn't anticipate when we first started. And in response to that, we have established our own research and development laboratory that's working on using cord blood for things besides stem cell transplant. They're looking at using it for wound healing, for macular degeneration, for Parkinson's disease, and other applications. In addition, we've also realized that it is a challenge for researchers and academic scientists to use cord blood as a starting material. They couldn't get access to it. They couldn't get the kinds they wanted. They couldn't get it in the timing they wanted. So we've really focused on the cord blood units that don't meet all of our criteria for stem cell transplant. How can we get those into the hands of researchers to try to find new and innovative uses to treat patients with this wonderful renewable source? So we've really turned our focus a bit on that to see how we can drive utilization of the cord blood units that we have and promote innovative uses of it. So I would like to see us make that pivot and also become a real sustainable organization. We still rely on a lot of funding from philanthropic sources, and it's becoming less and less, and we're earning a lot of our own revenue. And I would like to see that grow through my impact here.
Great. Excellent. Excellent. Any questions? Anyone?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Karen.
I have a question for Marcie. You know, Marcie, I wish when I was having my children that this was an opportunity that I could have done, because I'm a big blood donor now and truly believe in it. And what can I tell my daughters that are now? I mean, this is really the first time I ever heard about your organization and cord blood, and I'm somewhat fascinated with it. And I'd like to tell my kids, I mean, do you have like OBGYNs that tell their expectant mothers this is something they can do? Because we all know in order to donate, I mean, I get emails all the time to donate blood. There's shortages, and this month it's for this and that. What do you do to try to get more donors out there? First of all, to make them aware that you have this organization and what it does. And then second, how do you do it?
Yeah, so it's actually a real challenge because, as you can imagine, we've talked about how technically challenging this process is. We're highly regulated also. So we have a BLA license from the FDA, just like we were a pharmaceutical manufacturer. So we can't collect at every single hospital. We have targeted strategic hospitals where we collect. So at those hospitals, the messaging is really easy. We have interactions with the OBGYNs and midwives. We educate the cord blood or the childbirth educators so that all the families having their babies at the sites where we're located should know about the program before they deliver. It's a real challenge if you're not going to have your baby at a site that has a public banking program in place. It's very challenging to donate it. The other option is there are private banks where you can pay to have your cord blood banked for your own family if there is no public banking option. So it is a challenge. Therefore, we don't advertise or market very much to the general public because what I don't want to do is get all this interest and then I'm not having my baby at a hospital where you collect, so I can't donate. It's really, really challenging.
Cool.
Thank you.
Juliana, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I kind of wrote down a couple actually, but I was thinking sort of one is just what does a typical day at Cleveland Cord Blood Center kind of look like? I mean, what is the general process? I know you get the cord blood and then it's stored and you then send it where it needs to go when it's needed. But what does that all look like?
Sure. So the best way I could describe it, so we have 2 sites in Cleveland, 2 sites in Atlanta, and 2 sites in San Francisco. Our collection team has navigated the supply chain and airline schedules to have a box from each of those sites arrives at 7:30 a.m. here in Warrensville Heights. every day but Sunday. And then that's all the collections for the whole previous day. Then all those cord bloods get here in the morning. Usually it's around 20, sometimes 30. And then our lab staff will take them. They stay at room temperature, and then the clock starts ticking for us the moment it's collected. We have 48 hours from the moment it's collected to decide whether it meets all of our FDA criteria to go into the freezer and be safe for transplant. Not all of them make it, as you can imagine. So as soon as the cord bloods get here, our lab technicians accession them and check all the paperwork, make sure everything's signed, make sure all the labels are correct. If it meets that criteria, and that we're going to have enough time to freeze it. If it meets that criteria, then they weigh them to see how big they are. Bigger is better. The bigger they are, the more cells they have. If they meet that initial weight criteria, then they go into what we call a clean room, where it's a sterile room. The technicians are gowned. They clean everything before they go in. They take the cord blood units. They're in like a blood bag. It looks like a blood bag. They take a small sample out in that really clean environment and test it to see how many actual cells are in it. If it meets the minimum number of cells to be processed, then they transfer it to a bag that will separate the red blood cells from the plasma, they call them the total nucleated cells, which are the cells that we need for transplant. Those end up in a 25 mil cassette that looks like this. Look, I happen to have it with me. And they're frozen. So that process takes all day. By the end of the day, these will all get frozen from the units that we got that morning. Any units that didn't meet that criteria, then the other set of technicians will start trying to find places to use them. They get sent out to researchers across the country to be used in their research projects. They're vetted and we have agreements with them, but they take the rest of the units and they mail them out to researchers across the country to use them for research. On the back end of that, we are also getting notifications in our email if there are any patients that need cord blood units. We usually have advance notice for that, sometimes a week, sometimes longer than that. So we have a schedule of the units that will go out to transplant, and then those are sent out in the afternoon.
And I guess sort of leading off of that, since there's all this, sending and receiving and all of it has to travel, why Warrensville Heights? Why?
That's a great question.
Here.
Yeah, so our medical director was at Case Western, and when we got the funding to develop the Cleveland Cord Blood Center, we looked at a multiple of location sites, and actually our landlord, Jonathan Byrne, who is part of ORG, was spectacularly supportive of and continues to be supportive of our organization. As you can imagine, we needed really specific things in our laboratory. The space we have here in 25E was empty. It was a blank canvas. And he was willing to help us to get all of the specifications we needed for the laboratory and our offices in a really quick time frame. And that was why we chose this location at 25E. He really helped us in our build out in the beginning, and he's helped us to expand. We built a second lab here. We have administrative offices on the second floor now. So he's been a spectacular partner at ORG with us, and that's why we continue to be here.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. If that's it, Marcie, thank you so much. Thank you very much for sharing it. It was extremely fascinating information. Karen, I agree with you. I don't think a lot of people will know that or are aware of it. And so I just think this is going to be great to share with everybody. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Great. Excellent.